This one took an indirect path to me, but I'm glad it's here. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. It's another one of my favorite models of Les Pauls from 1983. It's the Gibson Spotlight Special, but wow, that is a nice one. I've decided photos just don't do Spotlights justice because there's some tops that you can look at a strange angle and they almost look plain, and then there's other ones like this one where no matter how you're looking at it, it's quite fantastic. But just in case you've missed my other Spotlight episodes, let's go ahead and do a little bit of a recapped history on them. These were first prototyped in the year 1982, but 83 is that first main year. Now occasionally you will find an 84 or an 85 out there, but these were made utilizing tops from the Heritage series that were just a little bit too short for a full one, so they utilized some leftover walnut from the Paul series to create these interesting faux neck-through vibes. Because they're still set neck like a regular Les Paul, but that stripe on the front makes it look like a neck-through construction. And I actually have a website called GibsonSpotlightSpecial.org where I've been tracking every single Spotlight that shows up online, either on guitar forums, Reverb, eBay, etc. And I do have quite a nice collection of these. For whatever reason, the stripe calls to me. I feel something deeply emotional and attachment to the Spotlight Special. But they came in two different hues, Antique Natural and Antique Sunburst. The natural ones are a little bit fancier because despite being basically a Les Paul standard, they get multiply binding around the body, but you'll notice it's a predominant brown layer, and they actually have two layers of it on our fretboard, giving it a multicolored fret nib. They also get a natural colored headstock veneer on them rather than the regular black Gibson one, on top of the fancy higher end M6 Schallers with the pearloid tips. And that's not to say the Antique Sunburst ones are bad, they're just a little bit more regular Les Paul standard. But we've talked about enough of these. I want to tell you about the story of this one. It's number 56, and it took a very indirect path to get to me. I was first offered to buy this guitar back in October 30th of 2024. His name was Jim P. He said he was 65 years old and has had this thing a long time. I don't think he bought it brand new, but probably slightly after that. Was kind of the gist of the emails. But he was located in Jackson, Tennessee, and he was one of those old school cash meetup only type of guys, and he wanted $15,000 for it. He was not open to shipping at all, and nothing ended up panning out. However, very recently, this exact guitar showed up in a small locally owned shop in the Memphis, Tennessee area. And at first, I was worrying for Jim because it's like, ooh, something showing up a lot cheaper than what he said. He either had a change of heart or his family sold it to the shop instead of Jim. Or was it stolen from him? So I reached out to Bruce and he said, no, I bought it from Jim. So we don't have to worry about his safety, but he must have come to terms because the shop said they paid him $5,500 for it. And I had to pay Bruce a little bit more than that, but to be honest, that shop actually treated me very nicely on here. Some shops are like, no, we're 100% firm, but he wanted to make a deal because he also watched the show, and he knows I collect these beauties. I did find it funny. In his emails, he was talking about having the Vintage Guitar magazine one that talks about spotlights, and that just happened to stick with this guitar. And he was also saying it was like really excellent, clean condition. Yeah, unfortunately not. Like once you get the light on this, there's quite a few clear coat nicks and dings, especially down here in the armresting area. Then I got a good chuckle at seeing a giant gouge out of the back of the neck. Everybody's idea of excellent condition can vary. Well, let's just say, yeah, wasn't expecting that on the back by any means, but that's okay. I really don't care about the condition of spotlights. As long as the pricing is right, I will happily give any wayward spotlight a home. But even if you don't want to sell, remember, send me photos. I love tracking these things. And if you want to take a look at my research and documentations and photos, feel free to check out that website, GibsonSpotlightSpecial.org. Because now it's time to throw this one over on the workbench, take an individual look at its parts and specs, and then we'll get to a playing sample. This one certainly had some stories to whisper in my ear after an hour of cleaning. So we do have replaced parts on this, but it's mainly just to restore the original look to it. Because when I first got this and took it out of the case, I was like, I'm pretty sure the bridge and tailpiece are replaced. And sure enough, when you flip it over, we do not have the Made in Germany marking, which should be right here. We've got those circles, so we know this is a modern style Nashville bridge. So that's not too big of a deal, but now our tailpiece is just so perfectly gold. But you see that casting mark running down the entire center as well as over to the edges? That's how you know it's not correct. This looks like a 2000s era Gibson part to me. The era correct original ones only have that in the center. So after seeing that, I looked at the pickup card covering this, I was like, no, that's not the right gold color. I got scared for a minute that somebody harvested the Shaws. But thankfully that wasn't the case. It's just a cover replacement. You can see the solder joints on that have definitely been messed with. But this Tim's Shaw dates to November of 1982. But you'll notice that ink stamp is really faded. So when you come down here, I'm betting the stamp has just completely faded away on this one. You can see whoever did the cover replacement job didn't do as clean of a solder work over on this one. But at least they're soldered into place. Half the time when people change covers, they don't even bother to do that. Everything was untouched inside the control cavity, so I have no doubt that this is the original set to this guitar. There's also another little piece of evidence here that shows that they changed the covers while the pickups were still installed in the guitar. And it's right there, a solder iron burn mark. But a few more mysteries inside our neck pickup cavity. So it's marked A. We see that often enough. But if you look past that, you can see ANTNAT for Antique Natural, which is our finish. But now check this out. Someone's name, Lee, with only some of it being slightly under the finish. But then over in this leg, I couldn't quite read what it says. It looks like it might say Bard, B-A-R-D. Either that or it's a leading D for Dard. Might be a first and last name, could be two people. I'm not sure the story on that one. But with it most likely being under the finish, that probably came from the factory. But there you can see how thick the walnut strip is as we move on over to our bridge pickup cavity, where we see a woman's name, Betty, as well as a number 3. Now that is the girlfriend's name of the person who was working on this guitar. That's well documented. Some people also say it was like a hidden grading system. There's kind of an interesting potential double H marking over here. This thing's just full of marks. But with a fantastic top like this, I don't blame the worksman wanting to put the mark onto it. Those pickups within the circuit read 7.29 k ohms. Neck is at 7.78, and they play together at 376. I'm very happy to announce nobody dared to put a pick guard on this one, and I'm very appreciative of that. Like, some spotlights look good with them, others not so much. This one, I'm glad it is the way it is. However, there's one more thing that I think makes this a restored spotlight rather than 100% original. Look at these knobs very closely. This appears to be a mixed set of what originally came on the guitar. Because look, these two are so much darker than these two, and I don't think natural aging caused that. I think knobs broke while something was being worked on or at a gig, and they had to buy some replacements because it just looks ever so slightly different. Now, I could be wrong. It could have just been a weird factory thing, like different batches, and they mixed them there, and they just happened to age differently. But I'll be curious to see if during the blacklight test they glow significantly different. As the main point to these spotlight videos and documenting all the examples I come across, I like to show off the condition as well as the top. It might technically be the same episode every time we see similar things, but the guys that watch my show, the loyal fan base that'll watch anything I upload, I think we all get what I'm doing with all this. It's just the appreciation of the differences, because usually a review on the internet, it just covers one piece and you don't get to see all the different ones. But then again, I don't think you guys want to see 100 different reviews of a 50s Les Paul Standard. At least the Spotlight specials are shrouded in a little bit of mystery, and they're kind of cool within the catacombs of Gibson's lore. But anyways, moving on from our 3-piece top with our mahogany body, we've got that mahogany neck with rosewood fretboard. Went ahead and did a polishing to our frets, but I didn't do this super crazy with the Dremel wheel because it just didn't feel it matched the vibe of this one. But our fretboard is actually in pretty good shape. It had a lot of natural grime to it, I guess is one way to put it. Like, it wasn't dirty, but you could tell somebody's finger oils were caked on here, so I cleaned that off. And was also able to find there is a crack in the fretboard. Is there anything you can really do for that? No, but it is worth mentioning. And we do have some fret wear. Nothing too excessive as far as spotlights go. As far as our nut, it measures 1.71 inches, 2.06 by the 12. And I was happy. This ended up being a 3-piece neck. And the 3-piece neck spotlights tend to be thicker. They're my favorite anyway. It's so much more rounded in the neck profile area. So if you ever had a spotlight and your one complaint was, I wish the neck was thicker, find yourself a 3-piece Antique Natural and then you'll have it. The contour gauge does a really nice job showing that off, of just how much thicker it is, especially up here in the 12th fretting area. Good information to have. But another thing I love about the binding is since it's predominantly brown, you get the cream dot inlays as well. Here's a look at the face of the headstock. Unfortunately, a little bit of a gremlin in our truss rod cavity. You can see we've got a few threads sticking out. So I was curious, did it leave the factory this way? Because I've got like a minty spotlight that did. So I released the truss rod just a little bit, and this is hardly even screwed on there. So it likely left the factory with a long rod. It still functions, but it is kind of a bummer because I prefer to have rods that were set correctly in the first place. But at least it works. And here's our original truss rod cover. As far as our headstock, if you're curious, is this just the neck showing through? No, it's still a separate wooden veneer, because otherwise you would see the headstock wings and things like that. Sometimes you can find some cool wood grain on these. This one, it's about average, but you will notice this. Like, well, what is all this weird splotching? Bruce asked me about that, or he warned me about it, and it's like, yeah, it does happen. Sometimes they just went crazy with their yellow grain fill. It's also evident in our cutaway over here. They went pretty heavy over there. That's just something you learn the more spotlights you see. Now that we've got it strung back up, I noticed a few other blemishes. Like right here, you can see it definitely dinged up against something at one point. This looks like where it was resting on a stand. Might have dinged up against it while being put on. Then there's quite a few areas on the binding that also have similar chips into the lacquer. So you can actually see the legitimate brown portion versus the ambered over with the clear coat. Thankfully, the side that you see while you're playing on the side of the neck doesn't have anything like that. However, there is a pretty big portion of lacquer missing over here by about the 3rd fret. So something to keep in mind, as well as our ding on the back. But here you can really see what I was talking about earlier if you didn't notice it. See how much heavier the wood filler is right there? So the neck has very minimal, if any, but then it transitions into how they usually do it. They just slather it on there. It's a very 80s characteristic. Sometimes you'll get botches of that just on the back as well. I'd say it cleaned up pretty nicely back here. It's not dirty, but somebody definitely had some sort of a crazy belt buckle that just really went to town on the clear coat. There's very few areas that actually look like it went through to the wood, though. We can take a second to appreciate the sides, because again, more nicks and dings, light chips to the binding. There's a pretty big one. And we definitely have some strap wear back here. But the thin binding in the cutaway, the top just looks extra thick on this one. Like they went extra thin on our binding. But that's cool because we got so much figuring. But this gold piece is still original, and you can see just how matted over it is. If you look at the screws, they have a lot of oxidation to them. So that tells you why the gold was replaced on this thing. Because remember, these were once all shiny gold at one point in time. Now they're just kind of rusty. Because it was likely in an area that had a lot of humidity or salt in the air. But we did have a shielding tin in this one, but it removed nicely to reveal completely untouched solder joints for the pickups and pretty much everything else. We've got a 1980 volume pot in both locations. And then, yep, as usual, you get 83 tones, although we can't really read the week. That's a common occurrence. As long as this set and this set match, you know it's factory. I think it's really cool you can see the flame peeking out through there. It's very tempting to remove the pots to take a look at it from the back. But no, my favorite part about documenting spotlights, right here, the Leonard family. So this one is a Floyd Leonard signed one only. So you've got his FL over here, and he wrote the date that he sound checked this one in April of 1983, and his secret rating on this one is star++. So it looked good and sounded very good. And I've got to say, I don't think he made a mistake on this one. That's a nice spotlight. Our back plates are the brown originals. And here's a peek inside of our toggle switch cavity route. Now we can move on to the back side of the neck. Remember, this is the 3-piece neck variety. Sometimes it's easiest to see it right here on the heel where you get those additional laminations. Because if you come up here, you get more of the yellow grain fill, and sometimes it can hide. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would look at this and think it is a one-piecer, but you gotta look closely, and you can see the seam lines in the center. But there's our Custom Shop Edition decal, Made in USA stamp, and this one dating it to the number 56 out of the run. But now, blacklight time. Everything is glowing perfectly up here. Even our plastics, they don't always. But now let's look at our knobs. They are close, but I think I'm going to stick with what I said earlier. That is a restored set, either from different batches or somebody just bought 2 of them off of eBay or Reverb to restore broken ones. But unless you're a guy like me who's seen a lot of these and really takes a close look, I don't think most people would have ever noticed that. But I do believe that blacklight confirms it for me. It also helps make it a little bit easier to see every area that has a chipped clear coat around our binding, such as down here. Our headstock is also looking good from the front. Here's a good way to prove that you just have buckle worming versus buckle rash, because buckle rash will show up like this, where there's a dark area. It looks like most of this is in the clear coat, except for maybe some of the very deepest areas of it. So if somebody wanted to refinish it and do a new clear coat, the wood would need minimal sanding. Our neck pocket area looks about right. The edges are such. As far as the rest of the edge, you can see a little bit of rubbing, a few clear coat dings in those areas down here that we saw earlier. Then our cutaway side. Now working up the neck, looks like you got a little bit of clear coat chipping right there, as well as that area that we talked about over here. This is the good thing about a blacklight test. Had you had missed that, that'll show it to you. Looks like we might even have a little bit of stand rash right here on the neck. But as far as like finish wear to the back of it from play, I don't notice anything like that, nor do we have any breaks, cracks, or repairs. And all said and done, the Spotlight weighs about average, 9 pounds, 11.5 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how these recovered Tim Shaws sound. So far, I'd say that's a nice set of Tim Shaws. That neck pickup is just so full and round. Then our bridge. You can tell it's got that classic rock style tone to it. And then that middle position. They play together nicely. Now that we know all about number 56, what are my final thoughts? I'm glad I decided to pick this one up because it's just such an awesome top. Sure, it had a few undisclosed things that we didn't know about, but I can look past it simply because this is such a gorgeous example. Normally, I don't like the antique naturals that have yellowed quite this much, but it kind of just all works on this particular one. It's an exceptional player. Again, I prefer the 3-piece neck version because they get the thicker necks. So I generally do prefer playing those, but every set of Tim Shaw, it's like the PAFs, the real deal stuff. They're all just a little bit different. Sometimes you get a good set, sometimes you get a bad set. I think this is a phenomenal one. It inspired me to play. This has a really nice raw, woody tone to it, which I generally like. The only thing I don't like about it, when I was trying, keyword trying, to do that Journey song, these frets are just so small, I cannot bend them that well. Like, look at how low those things are. But the sad thing is you can't refret an antique natural Spotlight because then you lose your cool multicolored fret nibs. Well, let's just say this one was definitely played as much as it was for a reason. But before we say goodbye, I actually do have some additional information from the previous owner of this one, Jim. Apparently, he saw it on Craigslist in the mid-2000s, and he just fell in love with it. He had never seen a Spotlight before, but it was for sale by a musician who just had a whole bunch of different guitars, but he came on hard times, was looking to sell something. So he picked it up from there and never touched this guitar. He was telling me how he never even changed the strings and maybe took it out of the case 10 or 12 times over the past 20 or so years. But when I asked him how he ended up selling it to that shop, apparently he had this thing on Facebook Marketplace for a couple of months and it had little to no interest until that shop owner reached out to him, and then they made a deal, and then I made a deal with him, and then you guys know the rest of the tale up to that point. But it just came down to him wanting a cash sale, local buyer, and thankfully it went to a shop who was able to ship it to me. So all's well that ends well. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed this journey, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.